So there's lots of things that frustrate us from time to time. Can you think of some things that frustrate you? One thing that frustrates me more than anything is, I think I mentioned this before, putting together household furniture, bookshelves and beds and all of the things where there's too many pieces, and there doesn't have to be that many pieces. They just want to see how small of a box they could fit it in and write the worst directions they can give you because they secretly are laughing at the factory where they make those things. This when was it? Saturday. We moved the girl. Kate had a bunk bed in her room, and we separated them so Sammy could have a big girl bed. And it wasn't even that hard, but you can't get to the bolt. You got to go like this and twist it slowly. That's frustrating. I'm sure you can think of lots of different things that are frustrating to you. One thing that is often frustrating is when somebody accuses you of something that you didn't do. You ever been there? Where somebody says something about you or accuses you of something and you know you didn't do it. Or you know you're not guilty of it. That gets me. That's one of those things like, there's a lot of things you could accuse me of that would be true, but this is one where I didn't even do it. Come on. And that's frustrating to us, and it's a hard thing for us to deal with. And that can come in various different ways. Whether it's you're accused of something and it's not really a big problem at all, or it can come in the form of teasing and bullying, where somebody is going to start picking on you and saying things that aren't true, but they want to find something that they can do to push you and to push you and to push you until they can get a reaction out of you. That's something that we're going to be seeing today in this psalm. Is David is going to be praying to God. And as he's praying out to God, he's going to say, God, in this instance, I'm innocent of what they're saying. I'm innocent of what they're saying, so much so that I've even committed that I'm not going to even respond to what they're saying because it's not going to help. And then David is going to say, I want to find my worth in you, God. I want to find my worth in you and in your protection and in who you are. Because if we try to find our worth in what other people say, we're going to be lost. And we're never going to find that worth. We have worth when we're in God and we find it in Him. I want to share a story with you about a boy named Stephen. Stephen is 13 years old. He's a sweet, sensitive, and artistic kid. He adores his older sister, and he loves skateboarding. Stephen loves baseball. He loves music, and he loves his dog, Finster. He also happens to be a little awkward. He's a smallish kid who is different and just doesn't quite fit in. To some extent, he has always been the target of teasing. But in middle school, at the beginning of 7th grade, was when the bullying escalated to a level that Stephen just couldn't face. And that day, his bullies, his tormentors, set him on fire with a lighter and an aerosol can of body spray. And they recorded their attack on a cell phone and they posted it on the internet. And later that evening, while his mom was getting ready for dinner, Stephen took his own life. It's a deeply troubling story. It's a sad story. It's not something we normally like to talk about. And maybe you're thinking, what are you doing? It's a Sunday morning. We came here to be inspired, right? We don't want to have to talk about something like that. But the truth is, it's something that as the church we have to discuss things like this because it's stuff that happens. And it happens all too frequently in this world. And maybe it's happening more and more, or maybe it's just getting more news press. I don't know the answer to that, but suicide is an issue that goes on in this world. We see it all the time. We see it most notably when it is somebody with any type of fame or celebrity. Just recently in the news, it's been in the news a lot lately with a lead singer of a band. And so it's something that people think about, and we as the church need to think about it, and we need to have a biblical answer to difficult and troubling situations as this. And I think today's psalm will give us some insight. How do we talk about difficult subjects? How do we work through them? With people struggling with depression, people struggling with different consequences of sin, perhaps, loneliness, feeling like they don't have any worth, that they don't have any value. See, because this is not just something that happens out in the world, but it happens within the church as well. There could be people amongst us who try to put on their happy face when they come here, but then they leave here, and then thoughts flood their head. I'm not good enough. I'm not like those people. I'm not really one of them. I'm just pretending. I'm a fake. I'm a phony. What do I do? We start to notice when we look at situations like this that the things that we think will make us happy, they don't. They never pay off. We see that when we see rich millionaire celebrities dealing with the same issues. We think, if I just had, it's the stress of the job. It's the stress of not having the money. It's the stress of being hated. Well, people can be the most loved people with the most money, the most successful careers, and they deal with some of these same issues. Where do we get our worth? Where do we get our value as people? How do we find these answers? How do we find where our value comes from? Well, today, I want to look at what this psalm says about it. But first, I need to look at a question that commonly comes up. And we may be inclined to say, well, we need to do something. We need to help each other. And people who, with good intentions, want to help one another, we start probably with this statement, well, you need to learn to love yourself. Right? If you could just love yourself, be right with you, then you can get through this. And it seems like a nice thing to say, but does that really help in this type of situation? James Beavers had a great article on this very question, and he answered this in 3 ways. He said, really, when we think about it biblically, self-love is unsatisfying. It might seem good at first, but in the long run, it's not satisfying, and it doesn't ultimately help us. Because from a Christian perspective, when we look inward and we look at ourselves, what will we see? We'll recognize that we're sinners. We'll recognize that we're broken. That by ourselves we don't have that good thing that we're looking for. We'll see that is unsatisfying in that sense. The second thing is God doesn't want us to accept our sins and just be okay with them. A lot of times, self-love means you just need to be okay with your sin and learn to live with it. And finally, what does the Bible say about it? Well, 2 Timothy 3 says that in later times, people will be lovers of self rather than lovers of God. We read in the Sermon on the Mount just a minute ago that we're to seek after God and His righteousness. We've been talking about David as we've been going through these Psalms, and we've seen David's life and the struggles that he's had and the difficulties that he's had and even the depression that we see David going through. Yet in the midst of his sin, in the midst of his trouble, in the midst of all these tough situations, we see that he's still a man after God's own heart. And often we say, well, why? God, why this guy? And I think one of the keys to understanding that is to seeing his prayer life in spite of the circumstances around him. David could be going through very difficult situations, and when he finds himself in those situations, what is his main thing? He falls on his face before God. His prayer life shows that he is a man after God's own heart. He is one who seeks after God in every and all situations. He seeks after God. I bet you could get to know somebody if you could hear what their prayer life was like in secret. People might look really good and awesome when we see them pray out loud in front of everybody. But what do they pray for? How do they sound when they're by themselves praying to God? I think that would give each of us an insight into our own hearts. Are we one who wants to be after God's own heart? Do we seek after God in all things? Is that what we're looking for? The first step is not self-love, although there's some truth to that. But the first step, I think, is turning to God in prayer. We cannot belittle the importance and the magnificence that we have in prayer. Look how David begins this psalm in verse 1. He says, "Hear a just cause, O Lord, attend to my cry. Give ear to my prayer." Multiple times he's just saying, God, hear me, please hear me, God. He wants to be heard by God. He wants to have communion with God. I heard a quote once, and I couldn't find it again, so this might be just a summary of it. But as a cry is natural to a baby after its physical birth, so should prayer be natural after a Christian's spiritual birth. You don't have to teach a baby to cry. You don't go, well, step one in crying, go, and then go, ah. It just knows how to cry. And after we are born again by the Spirit of God, the natural cry from our heart should be to call out to our God. It should not be something that we have to schedule or something that somebody has to tell us to do, or I'm going to make a New Year's resolution. I'm going to pray. All those things are good if we need that. But for the most part, you should just do it because that's who you are. And if you don't desire that, you need to ask yourself why. There's just these things that we do that we don't have to be told. Nobody makes a New Year's resolution that they're going to eat food. Why? Because it's natural to you. We try to make New Year's resolutions not to eat so much food. We need to be people of prayer. To be like David, a man after God's own heart, one who seeks after God in prayer, one who turns to God in prayer in every circumstance. Hear my prayer, O God. When we look at what the world says about us, when the world says about people, we see that the world is going to lie. And we need to be prepared for that. The world is going to lie, whether it is directly to us or the way that we set up our understanding of what is good and what is bad. I've read all kinds of articles these days about, there's even a term, I can't remember what the term was. But everybody posts everything about their life on the internet nowadays. That we spend so much time doing that we're not even actually living our lives so much. We just want to post it. We want other people to see it. And they've done studies where people, what's the term? I forget the term. But people will see their friends doing something because it's been posted on the internet. And even if they're at another fun activity, they're sad because they're missing out what's going on over there. So we can't even be present in a fun activity because we're worried we're missing out somewhere else because it's somewhere online. Or when people post things online, right, we only see the good. So we see, this person, their life's all together. Look how happy and smiling. Look, their family stands on a railroad track and takes pictures all the time. They must be doing something good. But we don't see what goes on after those pictures are taken. You just see the happy picture. Everybody's holding hands going. What you missed was, shut up, kid, shut up and smile. Shut up. Right? Because we're painting our reality. We're just showing what we want people to see, but it's not real. The world is going to lie. David is praying here, and he says, let's pick up in, verse 3. In his prayer, he says to God, "You have tried my heart. You have visited me by night. You have tested me, and you will find nothing. I have purposed that my mouth will not transgress." David's saying, God, test me. Test my heart. You know I'm innocent here. Now what David is not doing, he's not saying, God, I'm sinless and I'm so great. He's saying, in this instance, God, I'm innocent of this. They're saying things that are false. And they're persecuting me because of it. And so David gives that to God. But the world is going to lie. The world is going to say, you know what? You're not good enough. You don't got it. You're not smart enough. You're too stupid. You're too ugly. You're too fat. You're too skinny. You're too slow. You're too whatever they want to say. You're not like everybody else. You can't fit in. You've messed up too much. You don't look like the other people. The world is going to make you feel that way and put those things on you and put these accusations on you. And we have to say, does my worth come from what they say about me, or does my worth come from God? A great picture of this, I think it's a beautiful picture, is going to come from Zechariah chapter 3. If you want to turn there with me. If you can find Zechariah. It's not one of those ones that you normally turn to, huh? It's going to be in your Old Testament, towards the very end of your Old Testament, in the minor prophets. In the Pew Bible, if you just want to grab that, it's going to be page 794. Zechariah is a prophet of God after the captivity of the Babylonian captivity and during the trying of the rebuilding of the temple and the gates and all this stuff that we see like in Nehemiah. And he's prophesying and he's trying to get the people to turn back to God. And he has this vision. He has many different visions. But he has this vision of the high priest. And it's a beautiful vision. And I think it really gives us a nice picture here today. So I'm going to begin reading at Zechariah chapter 3, verse 1. And it says this. Then he showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. And the Lord said to Satan, "The Lord rebuke you, O Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is not this a brand plucked from the fire?" Now Joshua was standing before the angel, clothed with filthy garments. And the angel said to those who were standing before him, "Remove the filthy garments from him." And to him he said, "Behold, I have taken your iniquity away from you, and I will clothe you with pure vestments." And I said, "Let them put a clean turban on his head." So they put a clean turban on his head and clothed him with garments, and the angel of the Lord was standing by. Now just think of this picture really fast, just the first part. It says Joshua the high priest is standing there. The high priest is the one who goes into the Holy of Holies once a year to make appeasement of the wrath of God for the people. He has the turban on that he has there, the plate that says Holy to the Lord. He has these garments that they were told to make specifically from God. And as he's standing there, he says the angel of the Lord is standing in front of him. And the angel of the Lord, many times in the Old Testament, is what we call a theophany or a Christophany. Christ, before he takes upon flesh, is standing there before him. But he says he's wearing filthy clothes. Now the high priest isn't supposed to wear filthy clothes. He's supposed to wear pure clothes. He's supposed to look beautiful and clean and holy as he goes in to the temple. But standing at his right side is Satan, the accuser. And what is he doing? He's whispering in his ear, "Look how dirty you are. Look how bad you are. You're supposed to stand before God and do that. You're not good enough to do this. You're a filth. You're a disgrace. You make me sick." And as Joshua the high priest is standing there trying to keep his eyes on God, you can see that the accuser is there. The word Satan means accuser. So we could even say that Satan is there to Satanize him, or the accuser is there to accuse him, to say false things, to make him think that God cannot do anything, to make him think that God is not in control, to make him think you can't do this. You won't be clean. But then the angel of the Lord says, "Take away those filthy garments. I will make you clean." See, at that point, Joshua could not do anything by himself. He could sit there and he could listen to those accusations, but if it were not for God, he would remain dirty. He would remain lost. But God says, "I will take that away. The Lord rebuke you, Satan." You see, we try to focus upon God, but we often have those accusations coming into our ears, telling us we're lost, telling us we're not good enough. But in reality, we need to recognize, you know what? there's a truth to that. By myself, I'm not. But my faith and my hope is not in me in these filthy clothes. It's in that angel of the Lord who's standing before me. It's the one who takes away those dirty clothes and gives me pure ones. It's in Him who I trust. You know what's beautiful about this is also there's many pictures in here. The name of the high priest is Joshua. If you transliterate Joshua in Hebrew and you transliterate it to Greek, you get the name Jesus. Jesus, the high priest, is standing there. So many great pictures. We are dirty by ourselves, but God is the one who makes us clean. And we can listen to those accusations, or we can say, the Lord rebuke you. My faith is not in myself, but is in God. Turn back with me to Psalm 17. So as David is considering all these false accusations against him, as he's calling out to God and saying, God, I'm innocent of what they're saying at this time, he uses these words, and beginning at verse 8. He says, keep me as the apple of your eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings from the wicked who do me violence, my deadly enemies who surround me. Now think of that phrase, apple of your eye. What do you think of when you think of that phrase? Right? You think of a few songs maybe that's thrown in there. All right? Usually if you say somebody's the apple of your eye, it means I got my eye on you. It's a phrase actually that it's used quite a bit in the Bible. It was first in the King James was when it was put in the Bible from that idiom that we have in Hebrew, but Shakespeare used it, so it's a phrase that was common around that time. Really, the phrase, when we think about it nowadays, it refers to something or someone that you cherish. Someone that you cherish or you love above all other things. Right? I got my eye on you. But really, the phrase itself doesn't have so much to do with an apple. It has to do with your eyeball itself, how it's like an apple, particularly the pupil. We'd say the apple of your eye is your pupil. It's a very delicate place. Right? You ever gotten an eyelash in your eye? Doesn't feel too good, huh? But what if it touches your pupil? Then it really doesn't feel too good. You can kind of keep it there. You can go, do the thing, blow it, right? But if it gets anywhere near the pupil, it's going to hurt. It's a very delicate place. So when David says, keep me as the apple of your eye, protect me in such a way that I can have such communion with you, that I'm part of you in such a way that I'm that delicate portion, that I'm protected from you. And then you have this other picture of the shadow of your wings. And you remember Christ, he's praying. He says, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I've longed to gather you as a chick gathers her brood under her wings. This is a mama chicken grabbing those chicks and holding and keeping safe and protecting. That's what David says. God, I want to be the apple of your eye. I want to be under the shadow of your wings. I want the protection from you. Everything else is secondary. But give me your protection. Give me your love. Hide me in your wings. Because that is where I find my worth and my value is in you, not in myself. Our satisfaction comes from God, not in ourselves. So we ask questions. Does God care? Does God love me? Because maybe we can get to a point where we think maybe God doesn't care about me because look at these circumstances that I'm in. Look at the mess that I have to deal with. Maybe my only hope is not in God if I can't get through this, because is he helping? Is he doing anything? I'm going to read through a few passages kind of like I did last week, so if you want to follow, you can, or if you just want to listen. I'm going to start with Romans 5. And I want you to listen to these words and to see the love of God in what He's done for His people. Romans chapter 5, beginning at verse 8. Actually, verse 6. For while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were yet still sinners, Christ died for us. Christ died for us while we were still in our mess. He didn't say, oh, they're doing pretty good. Maybe I'll help them get the rest of the way. Christ died for us in our mess. Ephesians chapter 2. Ephesians 2, verses 4 through 7. Paul says this, but God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up with him, and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, so that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace and kindness towards us in Christ Jesus. While we were dead, God made us alive. When we were filthy, God made us clean. He has seated us with Christ in the heavenly places, and he is going to give us immeasurably more than we can ever imagine. 1 Peter chapter 1. First Peter chapter 1, verses 18 through 19. Peter says this, knowing that you were ransomed, or you were purchased from the feudal ways inherited from your forefathers, not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot. When God bought us, when God redeemed us, he didn't use the treasures of the world, the things that we think are so valuable. He used the most valuable thing in the universe, the blood of Christ. And finally, 1 John chapter 3. First John chapter 3, verse 1. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God. And so we are. John says, I want to think of a way to show you how much God loves you. That you are now a child of God. Not because of physical birth, but because of spiritual birth. Because the Spirit of God has come into your life. Because the Spirit of God has taken a broken, dead person and made you alive. Our worth and our satisfaction come from God. They do not come from an inner self. They do not come from what the world can say about us, the false accusations that can be hurled at us. They do not come at the pattern of what looks good in film or in television or in ads, in papers, whatever it is. That's not where our worth and our value comes from. It's not if I can dress the right way, whatever the magazine says is good, or I can wear the right clothes or have the right makeup, drive the right car. None of that truly matters. I don't get worth and value in that. Many people are just as depressed and lonely with all of it because our worth can only be found in God. Final verse comes back in Psalm 17. Psalm 17, look how David ends this psalm, this prayer. Verse 15. As for me. So meaning, thinking about everything that they've said, thinking about the way that they live their life. As for me, God, I shall behold your face in righteousness. When I awake, I shall be satisfied with your likeness? Do you find your satisfaction in God? That is where we should find our satisfaction. That is where we find our value. James Weavers ends his article on self-love this way. He says, do you love yourself enough to stop scraping together self-worth from broken, sinful pieces of self, and instead to embrace the free gift of the Father's love through Christ? We can try to scrape together, but do we see it only comes through Christ? If the world really cared about helping us love ourselves, it would simply preach the gospel. Only the good news of Christ offers true hope. The message of the gospel is a message of freedom from efforts to love our broken selves by providing a worth that comes from outside of ourselves, a worth that comes from Christ. Do you love yourself to accept that? And that's the question this morning. Let's pray. Father in heaven, I do praise you, and I do thank you for who you are. I praise you, Lord, that it is not me. It is not us. We do not have any value in ourselves, Lord. Our value comes from you, and may we see that. May we reflect upon that, and may we worship you because of that. We love you. We love that you have died for us when we were still broken, sinful God-haters.